Hello, guys. I'm Shane Davis, 20-year comic book veteran. We're going to talk a little bit of comic book news, but before we do, I'd like to remind you guys we have a very own campaign up and funding right now. Nine Lives Comics or Indiegogo, and we crossed $80,000 with 909 backers. This is a prequel series to our book, Annatomic, prequel to Inglorious Rex, but definitely go check out Annatomic if you guys have it. Now, I have been talking comic book news, and I'm a great big Transformers fan, so I have to talk about this. Now, I've been late to the Energon comics. To be honest, I've only really liked Transformer figures, model kits, and G1 cartoons. I've never really been the big comic book Transformers guy. I haven't. Now I remember back in the day, you know, the Dreamwave, I think the Pat Lee stuff kind of reinvigorized Transformers for a whole generation, which then led to things like Michael Bay movies and stuff like that, right? It gave studios confidence to do something with Transformers once again, that this just wasn't a dead property from the 80s, and it had a built-in fan base, and it could, transcend generations, right? And from that, we've had multiple cartoon shows, some good, some bad, like AllSpark. So that's me talking a little bit about the Transformers stuff with my history of it. Now, this video is going to go in a couple of different ways because it really is going to talk about the American comic book industry and something that I begrudgingly talk about. And after working in comics for 20 some years, there is this thing, and it would even be quoted by editorial staff, that comics are research and development. That as these companies are owned by mega corporate studios, such as like, say, Discovery, Warner Brothers is DC Comics, Disney bought Marvel, so on and so forth, that the comic industry kind of becomes a way to either renew copyrights or reconfigure. I know this is the weird part that a lot of people get hung up on, but say Superman, for example. Well, Superman used to, change into, Clark Kent would run into a phone booth and run out as Superman. Well, phone booths aren't a thing anymore, right? They don't exist anymore. So how do you update that character with modern times? Like if DC Comics had quit making, say, Superman books in the 80s, people would be like, well, you can't make Superman movie today because there's no phone booths and he can't turn into his costume without it. So in a weird way, comics can be used to modernize concepts from later years and kind of retell the same type of story over and over again. And that's where it brings me to Robert Kirkman and Skybound and what they've been doing with Transformers. And I'm a late comer to the Energon verse stuff, but let's be honest, I'm going to touch on that in a minute. It's redoing the same story we've read a million times or watched a million times with Transformers waking up with a little bit of a different twist on it and a little bit more violent. Now, what's happening at Skybound in the American comic book industry right now is they're leading the pack in a lot of ways. Transformers is, again, without Pat Lee, without that popping artwork, nothing against the artist that was on the book, and there's been a couple of guys, and now it's going to be Dan Mora, a DC comic artist. But like the Pat Lee stuff, the Dreamwave, I think is what it's called, stuff, like it was just like, wow, I haven't seen Transformers like this. They look cool, the foreshortening and all that stuff going on. This, to me, as a Transformers fan, it's more about the story, and it's more about a good jumping on point and kind of reimagining the origin story to be a little bit more adult. Now, with that said, everybody likes it. And it perplexes me in the American comic book industry that probably something, say, like Transformers could very well be outselling Amazing Spider-Man. Wes, Thinking Critical, said that he had an inside rumor that Amazing Spider-Man the last month was only selling about 47,000 copies. People were also saying that Marvel has canceled about 13 titles from their last month's solicitation to this month's. The American comic book industry is in a downward spiral. We've talked about on this channel Diamond in bankruptcy, and there is a cause and effect whether people want to put on a smiling face and say sales are better than ever. The data is not showing that, actually. The sales chart is misleading, because, again, I have to reference, that's assuming Batman sells 100,000 copies. What if he's actually only selling 70? You see, there's a 30,000 copy deficit on each one of those rankings from there on out. It's an assumption that Batman's selling 100,000 copies. It's not proven. So anyways, what's interesting with Skybound right now is the amount of money that they've been able to generate in 1 year's time between two Kickstarters. The two top selling Kickstarters have been the Compendium, the G.I. Joe Compendium, followed by the Transformers Compendium. That was roughly around $8 million or seven, almost eight combined. That's not including shipping and stuff that this company, Skybound, has been able to generate outside of the direct market. With that said, they're leading the pack with the G.I. Joe Transformer stuff. So what's really going on here is now Robert Kirkman is stepping on board with Transformers and now writing the book, which is kind of weird. I don't know why he just didn't write it before, because I'd heard years ago rumors that he was actually working on a concept and a pitch for Transformers, but Transformers a movie version, a reboot version. And I'm seeing this happen here, and I'm like, about 10 years ago, I heard, maybe less, maybe 6, probably 10 by now, I had heard something about this. Like it was in the rumor mill stages. And now he's got the book now, and I'm sure he kind of set a tone for the book, and the creatives had to execute it. But now he's stepping on board. As far as research and development goes, we also have news that Michael Bay is maybe coming back and doing another Transformers movie. So there's a lot of Transformer news right now. Now, with Skybound, because they're actually selling books and making money, they actually have the resource to hire natural resources. Again, Dan Mora here, one of DC Comics' top artists from Superman, Batman, now being poached by Skybound, and they actually have the money to pay rates to get people to come work for them on top selling books, things that maybe will produce a royalty or maybe not, who knows. They actually have the money to pay to play. And that's what it takes really to get top talent. And another thing that kind of snuck up under the radar, Robert Kirkman and David Finch announced their new series called Skinbreaker. Now, I'm a big fan of David Finch's artwork. I met him. He's a great guy. This isn't really appealing to me, but I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, because that is an opinion thing. I haven't read it, so whatever. But I will say the American comic book industry right now, Marvel and DC, actually need David Finch on a book. David Finch probably could have been drawing a book for Marvel or DC this whole time. But instead, David Finch is actually doing not a creator-owned thing. It was quick to say in an article somewhere that this is a creator participation project, meaning he will have some sort of participation fee that he can absorb in this, I guess, if it sells so many or becomes a movie, TV show, so on and so forth. But again, with the Dan Mora thing, why does Skybound getting all the top talent right now? I look at this, especially from working in the mainstream comic book industry, I actually believe Marvel and DC don't have the money. I believe that if they do have the money, it's for 2 issues of Batman Deadpool with Greg Capullo, stuff like that. I'm pretty sure, I'm willing to go out on a ledge here, that Marvel and DC cannot afford David Finch's page rate. And I ask myself, why? Now, people are going to say, Shane, that's a lie. You know, we got Jim Lee doing Hush too. You know, you got Jim Lee who's on salary, trying to keep that company afloat so he can continue to get some crazy executive salary from that company, because if comics quit being made, he loses a big old paycheck. So I actually don't look at Jim as a guy working for a page rate, and everybody should look the other way on that one. But who are the big name artists that are actually working at Marvel and DC right now? Why is Skybound now poaching top talent from both Marvel and DC? Talent that they actually need on monthly books to try to put butts in seats. And I don't know. I see this move right now from Skybound, and I'm like, where is this company going to be in a few years from right now? And as far as like the corporate structure of comic books, which I disagree on being research and development for other media and that only be the purpose of them, Skybound's actually ruling in that department. The Energon universe, where it mixes G.I. Joe and Transformers together, seems to be like well received by everybody. And this is something that they're actually striving for in Transformers movie universe, as they did at G.I. Joe in the last Transformers movie. So you could arguably say that this company, Robert Kirkman, could be operating Marvel and DC better than it is now if he was under control of them. And he's poached a couple of the editors from DC Comics. Probably some of the top people from DC Comics now work at Skybound. And I get the feeling, I can't be 100%, but I think there's some other artists that I don't know what they're working on. Maybe say Andy Kubert, who's been doing G.I. Joe covers, that maybe they're already working on a project at Skybound that hasn't been announced yet. And it probably is a really big hit around the corner. See, Skybound has generated the capital to actually hire top talent to actually make quality books that maybe people want or don't want. Now, me as a comic book fan, I'd rather see David Finch draw anything at Marvel, anything at DC before Skinbreaker. But I'm also, you know, up for something new at the same time. I'm interested where we're going to be at a year from now with and I'm not even calling it the big three. I'm going to call it the big two. I'm going to put Marvel and DC in one category and then Skybound in the other, because Skybound can't be leading the charts and having all the heat index in the American comic book industry month after month after month, and it's not absolutely eclipse Marvel and DC. And at some point in time, and I hate to say, if we're in the world a few months from now or a month from now where, say, James Gunn's Superman was a big flop, where does that leave DC Comics? You know, because let's face it, the James Gunn Superman movie doesn't look like a Superman movie. It looks like an introduction to the DC universe. And if that doesn't take with the normies, are these big mega studios satisfied with losing money on comics? And can the comics, Marvel and DC Comics, sustain hiring active talent that can actually sell books off the no profits that they're probably making? If you guys will hit like, subscribe, ring the bell for notification. Please don't forget to go back Annatomic up on 9 Lives Comics or Indiegogo. And I'll catch you guys again with another video.
If fighting was a god, I would worship him. I would bow to him. I would pray for victory. For he only grants opportunities. But behind every god lurks a devil. And the devil wants me to take a dive. My name is Annatomic. And this is how my legend was made.